Tonight's show is an exclusive interview with Jacob Chansley, also known as the Shaman at the January 6th Capitol breach. Now, this is an exclusive interview that was hard to get, and I know it's going to have mixed reviews. Some of you dislike this man very much, others of you like him. I'm not here to condone anything that happened on January 6th, but I wanted to hear his side of the story and get more details about the events of the day. So I hope you enjoy the interview. If you do, please give it a like and share it with others. Otherwise, let me know in the comments down below what you think. But this was eye-opening to me, and I realized how much the mainstream media was trying to control the narrative around January 6th. Enjoy. Okay, I have a very unique guest on our show today, a man whose face has been seen by billions of people around the world. His name is Jacob Chansley, but we're going to go by Jake. So, Jake, thank you so much for coming on today's show.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So, you are known, I guess the best way to put this is the government of the United States made you the face of January 6th because of having the face painting and the horns. And they really tried to pin a lot of January 6th on you and your story. And so today, I want to hear your side of the story. All we get is the CNN narrative. And I believe that it's truth mingled with a bunch of lies and narrative and spin in order to prop up this narrative around January 6th. And so I want to go through your side of the story because I believe those that tune in today, there's going to be people that very much dislike you, but are curious and open to hearing about your side of the story. And there's also going to be people that look at you like, wow, this guy had courage. And I'm also very curious about his side of the story. So if it's okay, I've got a list of questions and want to go through that with you.
Sure. Well, just to start, the government, yeah, like the January 6th committee and stuff like that, they definitely attempted to make me the face, but it was I think more so the Mockingbird media, and I call them Mockingbird media because of Operation Mockingbird when the CIA infiltrated the media outlets in the United States in the 60s and the 70s. So I believe that it was the Mockingbird media and the CIA so that's government, in collusion with the government and January 6th committee and their narrative. They're the ones that attempted to make me the straw man. They gave me the title QAnon Shaman. I never gave that title to myself. They said I did, but I didn't. I never called myself the QAnon Shaman. And beneath the term QAnon, the media had already prescribed the labels of white supremacist, terrorist, racism, hatred, all of these things. So it's a loaded term. And these are just psychological warfare techniques that were used on the American people, and they've been being used for a long time. So I just wanted to clarify that before we started.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that.
Because I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not a white supremacist at all. I don't have a hatred bone in my body. I abhor violence. I'm all about nonviolence and non-cooperation. I am no way, shape, or form advocate for any sort of violent overthrow of the government. It's actually the antithesis of that. I believe in non-compliance and non-compliance with corruption and tyranny, and that's the only way forward.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of the key areas of your story where you were actually trying to be helpful, but they were portraying you as trying to be evil or do evil within the Capitol. So if you could, let's go back before January 6th. What brought you to the Capitol on January 6th? Was it the rally for President Trump? Were you there for some other reason? What was the reasoning for going to DC that day?
Well, to start, I was in Washington, D.C. on December 12th for the second MAGA Million March, which was entirely peaceful. And that's what I expected more of on January 6th. But the reason why I went on December 12th and on January 6th was largely spiritual in nature as well as political. You see, I'm more of a spiritual activist, not a political one. I believe that our socioeconomic and geopolitical systems and perspectives are so corrupted and so askew because our spiritual systems, our spiritual perspective is so corrupted and so askew. So our socioeconomic and geopolitical systems are a reflection of our spiritual systems, our spiritual perspective. So my main motivation for going on both of those days was that Washington, D.C. is built on electromagnetic ley lines. Are you familiar with electromagnetic ley lines?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so you know that the Earth's surrounded by an electromagnetic field, right?
Yes.
Right. So that is around the Earth, but it also goes all the way down to the core. And so where it is that this electromagnetic field and these lines cross on the surface of the planet, where they crisscross, those ley lines and where they cross is where ancient pyramids, obelisks, temples, medicine wheels, etc., have been built for thousands of years. And it's because these electromagnetic ley lines are charged with energy and they are, in a sense, sacred sites. So all of the Washington buildings, like for example, the Capitol, the Washington Monument, the obelisk, the Washington Monument and obelisk, the Lincoln Memorial, the White House, the Supreme Court, the Jefferson Memorial, all of these things are built on electromagnetic ley lines. And in one way or another, they're all harmonic chambers because sound ends up affecting electromagnetic activity. So by going on January 6th, as a shamanic practitioner, it is my duty to protect sacred sites. It is my duty to ensure that on a day where there's literally millions of people on these electromagnetic ley lines and charging the grid of Earth with energy, it is my duty to go there and ensure that it's the highest vibe of highest vibration of thoughts, emotions, etc., and that the demonstration is in one way or another peaceful, that it is based in love of country, love of God, etc. So that was my first motivation. And then second is that, and a lot of people have the misconception that January 6th was just about the 2020 election. What people have to understand is that it goes back even further with that, even further than that. For me personally, and I think many others, but for me personally, it went back to 1913, the Federal Reserve Bank being installed and us having a debt-based currency. It went back to the corruption in our government regarding World War II and the fact that there were, like, the Ford Corporation and Standard Oil and a number of other corporations were working with IG Farben in Germany and funding and supplying both sides of the war. I mean, Prescott Bush was Hitler's bookkeeper, right? So that had something to do with it. For me, it also had something to do with the JFK assassination and all the lies that had been said about that for decades, which, by the way, it was after the JFK assassination that the term conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist became so prevalent, because lots of people didn't believe, just because they watched the footage, that JFK was shot by a single bullet and Lee Harvey Oswald. It's clear if you watch the footage, there's more than one bullet from more than one angle. So then there's that. Then there's things for me like, for example, Waco, Texas, the Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, the school shootings, the Vegas shooting, and all of the questions that are revolving around this, and the way that the Mockingbird media has suppressed these questions. The Iran-Contra scandal is another good example, and how Gary Webb brought this to the public, and then he was smeared and destroyed, and then eventually committed suicide by shooting himself in the head twice with a revolver. And there's no investigation into this stuff. It all just gets suppressed by the Mockingbird media. And then to top it all off, we've got Russia. We got 33,000 emails being deleted by Hillary Clinton. No investigation. We've got Russia for 4 years with clear evidence of malfeasance and corruption in the government. No investigation, no justice. Then we have, and even after it's all been proven to be a lie, then we have the COVID situation and the lockdowns, the mask mandates, the destruction of a roaring economy. Then we have the riots in 2020, no investigation, no justice. Then we have the 2020 election. So to me, it's about a long string of abuses. And that was what was in the Declaration of Independence, was this notion of a long string of abuses on behalf of the crown. And if we look into how the United States became a corporation, and I believe it's 1871, unifying the Vatican, the London Palace, and the United States of America, and creating a larger corporation, that the United States, and as a republic and as a constitution, basically took a back seat. Then we're getting into the next level of why it is that there's these long string of abuses, and how it is about centralizing power and giving more power back to England or the crown, the Vatican, and a much larger one world government, new world order based on debt-based currency and the monopolizing of resources and labor.
Okay. So I mean, this is a lot of things, a lot of government abuse of the citizens, manipulating, gaslighting, that leads you there. Jake, how do you end up in the Capitol? How did you end up in the building?
Well, so I abhor violence. I believe in nonviolence. And on the day of January 6th, I was doing everything that I could to stop people from, yelling at or harassing the police that were at the barricades. But when the police threw in tear gas and concussion grenades, all hell broke loose. When they threw those tear gas and concussion grenades into mostly a peaceful crowd, the only people that were combative with the police, or the only people that were like angry and shouting at them, were the people that were at the barriers.
Okay.
So when they threw that stuff into the crowd, everybody else was pretty much peaceful, and then stuff went crazy. And then the people at the front of the barriers broke through, and then a bunch of people followed after. And so, like I said, I tried to stop all that before it happened, and then stuff really got crazy. So, being a shamanic practitioner, I was trying to tell people, to fall back, come on, this isn't the way. And obviously, who's going to listen to the guy in the horns and the face paint telling everybody to calm down? So once they broke through and they got to the building, they broke in windows, they went inside the building, and they kicked the doors open, and people just started flooding in the building.
Okay.
And so I thought to myself, if things are this crazy on the outside, we really don't want anything like that going on the inside. And the only way that I thought that I could ensure that crazy stuff didn't happen on the inside was if I went into the building. And it is a sacred building. So my thinking is, I have to protect this sacred building. I have to protect the people inside, the occupants, the police officers, etc. So when that's how I got into the building.
Okay. And my understanding is there were like 3 or 4 major events going on. So there was the Trump rally, there was like a peace rally on the other side of the Capitol, and then I believe on the north side there was like a medical COVID mandate rally going on. And there are now people from these other 2 groups that are saying, we were led into the Capitol almost like it was a tour. And then on the side you were on, people were breaking in and doing that damage. And so you're saying that that's how you got into the building, was you weren't let in, or let in, but because of the damage that was done by other people, you were able to get in. And then that's when you started coordinating with the police officers?
That is correct.
Okay.
Now, what's really interesting, though, is that on the side where the damage was being done, there was a group of Ukrainians that supposedly, from what I'm seeing, were a part of the Ukrainian military and a film crew, Ukrainian military film crew that was there when that breach took place, filming the whole thing. And one of these individuals ended up taking a picture with me. I didn't know who he was. I'd taken hundreds of pictures with hundreds of people,
Yeah.
so there's all the people asking like, what are you doing taking a picture with Nancy Pelosi's son-in-law? What are you doing taking a picture with this Ukrainian guy? Which, by the way, the FBI asked me if I knew him. And I said, no, who is he? And they said he's a Ukrainian spy. So the FBI knew this guy was a Ukrainian spy. Okay. And it was him and his film crew that were there for that initial breach. And that whole thing goes way, way deep. We're not going to get into that just yet. But the point is, both of those gentlemen were just people that asked for pictures with me on that day. I had no idea who they were.
Okay.
So, and then there's some people that are saying that, like, when I went into the building, that I had my own personal photographer, that I'm an actor, a deep state asset, or a CIA actor or something, because the media was in the building that day covering the electoral college process.
Okay.
And then when the protesters got in there, the media just started snapping pictures. So some people are under the impression that I somehow had my own personal photographer, which is absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah. And real quickly, so just this week, I read that the FBI finally admitted that there were Ukrainian spies in the crowd. Like I just read that this week.
Oh, send me that article. I'd like to read that. I haven't
Okay.
seen that.
I'll get that.
I know Laura Loomer broke the story regarding what the feds told me. And she's also breaking the story about how there are ties to some of these white nationalist Nazis here in the United States, and their ties to Ukraine, and their ties to CIA, and their ties to the FBI.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you're in the building, you see the damage, you start coordinating with the police.
Yes. So I went into the upper terrace of the Senate chamber to sing my shamanic song. Like I said, it's a harmonic chamber. So part of shamanism is using song, dance, drumming, etc., to ward off evil spirits, to change the frequency of the chamber or of the ley lines, etc. And so I sang my shamanic song in the upper terrace of the Senate chamber, and that's when I saw the people in the Senate. And that's when I approached the police officers and said, hey, there's people down there in the Senate. Like, if you want, like, I can help you and like make sure nobody steals anything or vandalizes any property, or, like help you even clear the chamber. And they saw that I had a megaphone. They're like, yeah, let's use that megaphone. Let's go. And so that's why I was being escorted around the building and going from locked door to locked door with the police, looking for an entrance into the Senate chamber.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll come back to that, because previous to the Tucker Carlson footage that he aired, the narrative was that you were going around damaging things, that you were basically calling the shots, that you were the leader of this group doing the damage, when in fact you were in coordination with the police to try to bring peace and clear the Senate chamber out, because you regarded it as a sacred place. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't per se in coordination. For at the time that we were walking around the building looking for an entrance, I was trying to work with them to, yes, ensure no vandalism, ensure no violence, ensure there was peace, ensure there was stability, and some level of order was brought back to that sacred chamber, to that sacred space.
Okay. And yeah, maybe coordination was the wrong word, but in my mind, once that footage came out, and that was a big game changer for me, in my opinion, towards you, when I saw that, because when I originally saw it, I thought, okay, here's an unarmed guy in this outfit. There are times where you're alone with 7 or 8 police. Like, why wouldn't they have just grabbed you? And yet you can see them, hey, try over here, try. Like, it looks like you guys were working together. From my perspective, where I can't hear anything, all I can see is video of what looks like working together. But again, and this is why I wanted your story, is I'm trying to understand what was going on inside the Capitol. Okay, so then you get into the chamber, and instead of doing damage and all the crazy things that they were saying, you're in there basically doing this harmonic prayer, trying to clear the energy. Okay, so take it from there. So you do that, and then
Well,
from there, do they lead you
let's
back out, or?
yeah. So let's not forget, just to tell the whole story. I got into the chamber. I walked up to the VP and the VP's chair there, the vice president's chair. I sat down so that I could watch the whole room and make sure nobody's stealing anything, nobody's vandalizing anything, etc. And it's also the harmonic node for that room,
Okay.
you see. So I also wrote a note. The government and the media have tried to say that it was a threat. It was not a threat at all. The note said it's only a matter of time. Justice is coming. I probably should have said something along the lines of it's only a matter of time. God's judgment is coming.
Okay.
But, you know, the point is that it was never meant or intended to be a threat whatsoever. It was intended to, you know, ensure that the people knew that, hey, you know, time is on the side of those that worship God. Time is on the side of those that are attempting to create peace and not division, unity and not division. Um, it was just a spur of the moment thought. I didn't really like think too much about it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was just like, you know, this would be funny. You know what I mean? But anyway, after that is when I said the prayer.
Okay.
And yeah, it was to bring positive entities, positive angelic entities, angelic beings, the Holy Spirit into that chamber from that harmonic node on the ley lines, you see? And these ley lines are interconnected with the dimensions, the higher dimensions and the lower dimensions in the spirit world, okay? So it was about expelling the evil, which I did with my shamanic song, and then sanctifying or making sacred that chamber again in the name of God and the Holy Spirit. You
Okay.
see?
Yeah.
And then yeah, after that, the cops, some police came in riot gear, and they're like, "Look, you got to go." And I was like, "All right, let's go." You know, I started using my cell phone to say, "God bless the men and women in blue. You know, we're on your side. We love you." You know, stuff like that. And yeah, they escorted us out of the building. And by the time I got out of the building, dude, people were coming up to me with their phones, and they're like, "Dude, you're viral." And they're showing me on Twitter. Like I had already gone viral by the time I was out of the building.
Yeah. So I didn't go to Washington, D.C. I had no intention of going to Washington, D.C. But on that particular day, I was broadcasting not with this background. And so people thought I was there. I was actually in Disney World with my family. And I remember watching this. I'm standing by the Millennial Falcon reading the news and seeing your picture and going, what is going on? Like, what is happening at the Capitol? And then I start hearing these stories from other people that are like, no, we were part of this other group that was let in, or we were on the other side, and there was no rallying, no percussion grenades, no pepper spray, nothing. They didn't know any of that was going on. And then there was the chaos that CNN was buying footage left and right, in order to push this thing. Now, Nancy Pelosi, she did have a film crew there with her, but you're saying you did not have one there with you.
No, not at all. But you know what's really interesting about this is that there's a guy that I believe his name is Jaden X, and this guy was an Antifa supporter. I believe he's also an Antifa member. He went into the building. He supposedly went into the building and was there filming Ashley Babbitt being shot. Now, supposedly, according to what I've read online and in an article or two, Jaden X's brother has come forward and said that Jaden X was corresponding with Ray Epps and also was there with the CNN film crew filming all this stuff. And Jaden X hasn't been charged. And from what I understand, the Ukrainian spy, I believe his name is Sergei. I think that's his name, Sergei. From what I understand, he hasn't been charged either, and he was there when the building was initially, broken into on that side. So, like, there's a lot of questions, and there aren't very many answers. And yes, the Mockingbird media has been divided into these two groups, where you got the CNN, MSNBC, the left side, creating this narrative that it was a violent insurrection, the worst thing that's happened to the Capitol in our history, which they, don't bother mentioning the Weather Underground literally blowing up the Capitol, I think it was in the 70s, and Bill Ayers and his involvement, and the fact that they were leftists. They were socialists and communists. Oh, yeah, and Bill Ayers got a spot in Obama's cabinet after he was pardoned, by the way. Or they don't mention the fact that Puerto Ricans literally shot congressmen in the Capitol several decades ago. So they just totally look over those things, and they're trying to compare January 6th to 9/11 on the left. They're trying to say it's the worst day in American history. And yet on the right, the Fox News, Newsmax types, they're showing footage from inside the Capitol where everything was pretty much peaceful.
Yeah.
Right. So you have the left and the left side of the Mockingbird media wing using the stuff outside where there's chaos, creating this narrative. Then you have the right, and the right side of the Mockingbird media wing using the narrative from the inside the Capitol, and everything was largely peaceful. So now you have this division. You have these two people butting heads and arguing over a situation that it isn't black, it isn't white, it's gray.
Yeah. 1,100 people have been arrested. 300 have been incarcerated. Just today, the leader of the Proud Boys group, Enrique Tarrio, I don't know if I said that. Yeah. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison, even though he wasn't in Washington, D.C., and he wasn't at the Capitol, and he didn't go into the building. So now, what was it like to be arrested? What was it like to be incarcerated and having all of these people telling you you're a criminal, you've done all of this, but then on your side believing, wait a minute, I was trying to clear the energy, I was trying to limit the amount
The
of
police.
vandalism. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Well, it
was
was
that
very
like?
difficult. It was, well, first of all, let me just address this thing about Enrique Tarrio, because the Mockingbird media on the left has tried to push this narrative that the Proud Boys are a white supremacist group. Enrique Tarrio, if I'm not mistaken, he's half black and half Puerto Rican.
Okay.
And he's supposedly like one of the founders of the Proud Boys. So this notion that it's a white supremacist group is absolutely ludicrous. I know all sorts of, I've heard of all sorts of people that are of minority descent that are in the Proud Boys. So that's another aspect to the Mockingbird media. It's about creating a narrative using trigger words and trigger images together to create an emotional response in the subconscious mind. And then through that emotional response in the subconscious mind, it affects a person's conscious perception of reality. Now, regarding this, what happened with me? Well, let us not forget that I was in solitary confinement for 10.5 months. And all the while, I have the government and the media trying to paint this picture using trigger words, using trigger images, getting people in the country to have an emotional response so that they hate me, so that they hate Trump supporters, and the full weight of the media and the government was placed on me because they chose to make me the poster boy.
Yeah.
And because of that, the association, regardless of whether or not I did anything like vandalism or violence or whatever, the association of my image with that day made it to where what happened to me was much more severe than, in my opinion, it should have been.
Yeah. 10 months in solitary confinement.
10 and a half. And that 2 extra weeks does make a difference.
Oh, I do imagine it does. So, okay, so then you're pegged as the poster boy because of your outfit and making it to the inner chamber, and then out of nowhere comes this footage that Tucker Carlson of formerly of Fox News releases, and it shows a completely different perspective and picture of you and your involvement and your behavior. Do you credit that expose with you being released from jail?
No, and that's what's interesting about disinformation is how
Okay.
fast it travels. And disinformation and misinformation travel so fast because of something called confirmation bias. When we see something that confirms our bias or confirms our perspective, and then so people share it left and right thinking that they were right about things. No, Tucker Carlson's footage had nothing to do with my release. I got my release date in mid-February of 2023. In mid-February of 2023, I knew I was going to be released on March 28th of 2023. And then a couple weeks later, Tucker Carlson's talking about how he's going to do this thing on January 6th. And then so some of the people that were watching the TV told me about it, and I was like, all right, well, I'll tune into that. I'll check that out. So that day, I believe it was a Monday, Tucker Carlson airs this footage, and his first episode about January 6th was largely about me. And like he shows that footage, and I was like, oh my God. And what's really funny is the shock on behalf of the prison inmates and the guards, because I had been telling the prison inmates and the guards for a while that what they saw on TV, and they didn't believe me. They didn't believe I was there to try to help. They believed the Mockingbird media narrative, the way that they tried to make it look, the illusion they tried to create using trigger words and trigger images. And my image at that time on that day was very shocking to the system, to the cognitive system. You see, so images, trigger images, and then trigger words: insurrection, violence, chaos, deadly insurrection, etc. Right? QAnon, Shaman. So the prison inmates and the prison guards are coming up to me for days afterward, and they're like, dude, like, so you're like innocent. Like you really shouldn't be here. Like you were trying to help. And I said, dude, I've been telling you for over a year. you know?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it felt very vindicating to finally have that. If it didn't change the outcome of your prison sentence, I do believe it had influence over the American people's perspective of you. I know it did for me. I saw that and I was like, wait a minute, what? That this guy was being led around. It looks like they're, again, the word I came up with was, it looks like they're coordinating. I didn't realize what you were trying to do. But then when you finally get in there, I'm like, okay, now they're going to show him being violent or destructive. And then you go do this like prayer song. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Like I've been fed this bull crap for over a year now. And so it was perspective shifting, at least for me. I don't know, maybe people in the comments that are watching this can say, whether they had a perspective shift or not. But your lawyer, Albert Watkins, said in an
He's my
interview.
old lawyer.
Old
He's
lawyer.
my old lawyer.
Old
He
lawyer.
did a
Okay.
terrible job of representing me. Let me clarify that now.
Okay.
He did a terrible job of representing me. He did and said all sorts of things on my behalf that I never said and that I never asked him to do.
Okay. Okay. So, but one thing he did say was he said that he was shocked that the government knowingly withheld that video footage because they needed that narrative of keeping you as the poster boy. That was pretty shocking to me, because in a criminal trial, if you have evidence and you know of evidence, you're supposed to turn it over. And so you were being, I mean, it was a miscarriage of justice because they knowingly had that video evidence of you.
Yeah, well, see, and so this is what's interesting about January 6th and all these cases and this notion of a miscarriage of justice, okay? So the way that the legal system is supposed to work is that there's supposed to be an investigation, evidence is to be collected, then arrests are to be made and charges are to be filed. what we saw with January 6th and what we continue to see with January 6th is that a lot of these people that are still being detained or have been arrested, what happened is that they were arrested, charges were filed, then the case was built, then the evidence was collected. You see? And so when you do that, you run the risk of certain evidence not being in the discovery or in the information that's passed over to the defense attorney, right? Now, what the government was arguing in the motion that we filed, my new lawyer, Bill Shipley, what in the motion that we filed to vacate my conviction and my sentence, which Judge Lamberth basically dismissed and said there's no chance for appeal on this. What the government said was that they made the evidence available, and they told my previous attorney that it was available. But this is how they made it available, and this is what's really important. Okay, they made available a website where all of the attorneys can go to and examine the over 40,000 hours worth of footage and find the needle in the haystack. So what the government basically did is they have all this evidence that is against the defense. And then they're handing these defense attorneys the haystacks and saying, find the needle in the haystack, find the exculpatory evidence. Now, this is what's even crazier. The January 6th committee, as well as some of these prosecutors, have either altered evidence or altered footage so that certain things aren't coming to light. For example, in one of these Proud Boy cases, one of the Proud Boys that was on trial, there's a video that shows them in the Capitol. The government cut the footage right before it was clear that these Proud Boys were protecting a police officer from other protesters. Okay. The January 6th committee altered a woman's tweets to make her look like, first of all, that she had a blue check mark, and they also took a picture of her that made her look like she was armed and made that her profile picture when it wasn't her profile picture. And it's things like this that have happened again and again and again throughout this process, whether it be with the J6 committee or it be with the prosecutions of these people. And it's these things that are the miscarriage of justice. It is these things that are essentially against protocol.
Yeah.
And therefore, in my opinion, draws a lot of attention to the legitimacy of some of these claims that are being made. Because the thing is, look, there's no denying some people assaulted police officers, some people destroyed property. And guess what? I don't care if you're a Trump supporter, Antifa, or BLM, or whatever. If you assault police officers, if you destroy property, you deserve to be prosecuted.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that's, I think why I wanted to bring you on is in no way do I condone what happened at January 6th. Again, I was in Disney World watching it on my phone going, what in the heck is going on? I did a live broadcast later that night, but at the same time, like Adam Starka and yourself, they've tried to lump you guys in as these like violent police beating, Capitol property destroying criminals. And it was not that way at all. And so, you and I probably agree on many things and disagree on many, but I wanted people to be able to hear your side of the story, because again, I believe there's going to be people that watch this that they don't think very highly of you, but they're curious what your side of the story is. And I think there's other people that do like you, and they're also very curious. And so I thank you for taking time out of your day to share your side of the story. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you would like to share?
Yes, a couple of things. Number one, there have also been people, I know a guy that was a police officer and a Marine that was arrested due to what happened at January 6th, even though he was nowhere near Washington, D.C., all because of social media posts. And he got the SWAT treatment from the FBI, by the way. Okay. But then we have people like Jaden X that were inside the building. We got people like Ray Epps still not arrested. you know? And we got people like Nick Fuentes, who is telling his supporters that were there on January 6th to move past the barricades, to ignore the police, and to go into the building and take the Capitol. No arrest for Nick Fuentes either. And I don't like Nick Fuentes at all. Okay. He does not speak for Americans. Okay. He does not speak for people that want to put America first. He speaks for himself and only himself and the few, couple thousand groypers that are online. Okay. So this notion of white nationalism, this notion that the media is trying to create about like Nazis and white supremacists being in the Republican Party it's ludicrous. And it's because of people like Nick Fuentes that there's that narrative. Now, because I am largely a believer in the constitutional republic and what the founders were trying to do in establishing a constitutional republic and establishing a place of freedom for humanity. I find myself more like a centrist and a libertarian, not a Republican or a Democrat. Republican and Democrats divide and conquer. So with that being said, you're familiar with the term deep state, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now here's the thing. I don't like anybody really there are these candidates for president that were on the debate stage for Fox News. Don't like any of them because they're all talking about getting rid of the deep state, and yet none of them can define what the deep state is. So for your listeners, I would like to define what that is, and I would like to define how it is that we can make the deep state obsolete. And I can do that in a very short amount of time. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the founders defined tyranny as the combination of the three branches of government: legislative, lawmaking, executive, law enforcing, and judicial, law adjudicating. They defined tyranny as these three branches being consolidated into a central power, like what they were dealing with in England. Okay, because the crown controlled the courts, the crown made the laws, and the crown enforced those laws. Okay, so when the founders created our country, they divided these branches of government into three separate branches with checks and balances so that power could never be centralized. Okay, now, when we turned our country into a debt-based currency nation, when we turned our country into a corporation and we had a debt-based currency, what happened is that these were steps toward the centralizing and the consolidating of these three branches of government of power into a single branch of government that we call the bureaucracy. So the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. constitutes as like a fourth branch of government that is over 500 bureaucratic agencies that are tasked with regulating commerce. Now, the legislative branch has delegated to these bureaucratic agencies the ability to regulate commerce because the government has the ability to, quote unquote, regulate commerce. But these bureaucratic agencies are regulating commerce. What they're doing is they're basically writing law. They're saying what we can buy, what we can sell, what is legal, and what is illegal. Okay, so that's legislative. The bureaucrats also, these bureaucratic agencies also have their own law enforcement that enforce these regulations. Okay, that's executive. And they have their own administrative courts that adjudicate these regulations. That's judicial. That's centralized power. That is tyranny. Now, what it's really important to understand about each of these bureaucratic agencies is that they are a pyramid. Okay, they are a pyramid. And at the top of these pyramids are appointed people, not people that are elected. Now they are appointed by elected officials. So the president appoints these people and then they have to go through the process of being confirmed by the Senate. However, if you corrupt the presidency, which we've had lots of corrupt presidents, that should be very clear, especially when we get into the idea of elections being corrupted for decades. So if you have a corrupt president, and then you have corrupted enough people in the Senate, then you can get somebody that is a part of this corruption in these bureaucratic agencies and at the top, and then they stay there for way, way longer than the people that appointed them. And in the process, they can end up filling in the lower portions of the pyramid with people that are in cahoots with this corruption. Now, what is this corruption? Look at it like this. You got somebody like Anthony Fauci at the head of all of these 500 bureaucratic agencies, okay? And what is Anthony Fauci doing? He's working with the very corporations that he is supposed to be regulating. So the corporations are writing the regulations, right? And then the government is enforcing the corporate will. So the government has a monopoly on the initiation of force. And they are using that monopoly on the initiation of force to reinforce these corporations' will and their monopoly over our resources and our labor. And in the process, these bureaucrats are moving public tax dollars, public money, into the private hands of less than 1% of the population that own these international corporations or these international banks like the Federal Reserve and the IMF and stuff like that. The international banking cartel, they're moving the public money, tax dollars, into the private hands of less than 1% of the world's population. The pharmaceutical companies, the military industrial complex, you know, biochemical, bioengineering corporations. The list goes on and on and on. Okay. Basically, it's what JFK called a tightly knit, highly efficient machine. And for those of you that are skeptical about what it is that I'm saying, I want to quote Kennedy, and then I'll end it on this, and I'll end it on the solutions. Okay. Kennedy said, "We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversions instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conspired vast human and material resources to create a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, scientific, economic, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No rumor is printed, no expenditure is questioned, and no secret is revealed." So Kennedy was talking about the deep state. Okay. He is talking about this bureaucratic mess that we have created of over 500 agencies that are colluding with international interests to monopolize our resources, to monopolize our labor, to keep us in a debt-based centralized currency, and to keep the American public in on this international move to a one world government through things like the WHO, the CDC, the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, etc. And through things like the Bilderberg Group, through things like the Council on Foreign Relations, through things like stuff going on at Bohemian Grove and stuff like that. The World Economic Forum. All of these things play a role. These are like gears in this tightly knit, highly efficient machine. Some of them are bigger gears, some of them are smaller gears. Some of them are near the top of the pyramid, some of them are near the bottom of the pyramid. That being said, this is how we make all this stuff obsolete, okay? The deep state is about creating something called full spectrum dominance. That's a military term. It means, first of all, the control of the minds through psychological warfare techniques, and through controlling the minds of the people in the country, they are able to then control the land and its resources, the water or the air, the water or the seas, the air and the airspace, subterranean, deep underground military bases, extraterrestrial, things like satellites, outer space, and chemical and biological agents, and technology, things like cell phones, computers, televisions, radio, etc. The medical system, the financial system. This gives these less than 1%ers who created this system full spectrum dominance. So they understood that they could not be God, but they could play God if they had full spectrum dominance. So this whole system is set up to basically be parasitic on humanity, on people, and on the environment. Okay. Now, I'm not a modern environmentalist. I don't believe in the climate change narrative, but I do believe in the notion of an ecological crisis and the notion that we are creating mass extinctions and mass ecocide because these corporations are working with the government to create a corrupt system that is destroying the environment so they can make money. Okay. So they have tried to centralize our energy grid. They have tried to centralize our communication grid. If you look into the way that they're trying to centralize the energy grid, you can just look at the way they're metering energy. They're trying to, they've already centralized our communication grid. If you look into the Ericsson report and this company Ericsson that's out of Switzerland and owned by the Wallenberg family, and how they control all the global communication. They've also controlled and centralized our transportation and our supply chain largely. Through government regulations. They've also controlled and centralized our food supply. Okay. They've also controlled and centralized modern medicine. Right. So what we need to do is create a new system that will allow us to circumvent this full spectrum dominance system. And how we do that is, number one, through Tesla tower technology. Nikola Tesla invented a tower that uses the electromagnetic ley lines where they cross to create an infinite free wireless energy signal that allows people to tap into the free infinite energy that is in the earth itself and on the ley lines. And this would be wireless, so there would be no need to meter it. People could get infinite free, clean wireless electricity. So that decentralizes the energy grid. These towers can also be used as communication towers globally without the need for satellites, cell phone towers, radio towers, any of that stuff. And it would all be environmentally friendly. Okay. All these satellites and all of these cell phone towers, they're using what are called ELFs, extremely low frequency waves. And these things cause depression, anxiety, neurological disorders, cancer, all sorts of stuff. So now with the Tesla towers, we decentralize the communication grid. It also would allow us to influence agriculture, because you can use the frequencies of the Tesla towers to increase the size and the rate of the plants that we grow for food. Okay, all without the need for pesticides, herbicides, etc. It would also enable us to create a new transportation system, because we could use these electromagnetic ley lines as like electromagnetic highways of sorts, where we could travel in them on the air, like through the air. Okay. And we could do this through vehicles that Nikola Tesla created himself over 100 years ago, or we could use it using the TR-3B, a patent that Donald Trump just released. It's a triangular shaped craft that uses inertia propulsion or anti-gravity technology. He released this patent. He declassified it in 2020. People that want to look it up, they can look up the guy that that filed for the patent. His name is Salvador Payas. Okay. He also filed for a patent for something called a 0-point energy engine, gives people infinite free energy, and a room temperature superconductor that allows the 0-point energy engine to function without overheating. So we have all of the tools at our disposal that we need to create a new decentralized energy grid, decentralized communication grid, a new form of agriculture, a new form of transportation. And Dr. Rife, that's R-I-F-E, Royal Raymond Rife, and Nikola Tesla were working together in the 1930s to create a machine that uses sound and frequency to not just increase health, but also destroy disease. The way that you can destroy a wine glass with sound and frequency, you can also destroy a cancer cell or a virus with sound and frequency without doing any damage to healthy human tissue. So this is how we can create this decentralized grid. This is how we can create a new infrastructure that makes the old one obsolete. So it's not about fighting the old. It's about using our energy to build something new. And in the process, we can get away from this system that is parasitic on humanity and on the planet. And we can also neutralize all the pollution that has been created by this system. And this pollution is what is called anthropogenic chemicals, forever chemicals that do not biodegrade. And because they don't biodegrade, they do something called bioaccumulation in the ecosystem that causes the microbiological life in the soil, the water, and the air to be killed off. And it is that microbiological life in the soil, water, and air that allows all macrobiological life and systems to function. So if we kill and undercut that foundation, then all life on the planet goes extinct. So we are talking about fighting for the very existence, not just of the human race as a whole and our children, but also of all life on the planet. If we continue to trust these less than 1%ers, if we continue to use their centralized, monopolized grid system, and all we have to do is work together and unite, because Republicans and Democrat voters can agree. If there's a cure for cancer, I just gave you one, and there are many, it should be released to the public in spite of the fact it'll have a detriment on pharmaceutical interests, right? And it's the FDA and the NIH that are stopping this technology from getting to the public. If there's an infinite free, clean, wireless energy supply, which I just gave you two, 0-point energy engine and Tesla towers, then it should be released to the public, in spite of the fact that it'll have a negative impact on oil companies, on lithium mining, on solar panels, on wind turbines, and natural gas, right? If there's a better form of agriculture that doesn't use disease-causing pesticides and destructive pesticides, like Tesla tower technology, it should be released and used by the public, right? Everybody can agree on this stuff. So that's how we create unity. That's how we get rid of the deep state. That's part of it. We also have to elect people into the legislative branch and the executive branch that have cojones, and they're willing to defund some of these government agencies. And they're willing to say, okay, we're not going to fund these agencies. You guys are corrupting the system. We're going to allow these technologies out to the public, and we're going to allow the free market to do its job. We don't live in a free market right now because we have corporate interests dictating government policy. That's fascism. Okay, so we're kind of living in a fascist system right now. What we really need is real capitalism, real freedom, and a decentralized grid. So I hope that wasn't too much.
Yeah, no, it's again, there's areas that you and I agree on, and taking back this beautiful country, getting it away from those that seek to profit off of all of our labor and destroy the earth. I look forward to a day when that can be true. I want to thank you, Jake, for coming on and sharing your story with us. I hope that people will find it interesting and have a perspective shift. But thank you very much again for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Can I plug my Twitter and my website?
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so you can find me at America Shaman. That's America Shaman on Twitter, at America Shaman on Twitter. You can also go to my website, ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. That's ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. At ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com, we have free courses that people can take. We have, like 12 hours worth of podcasts for the Forbidden Truth podcast. And we have dozens of hours worth of content via like interviews and these courses and all of this stuff. We also, we are just about to get up our merch. So there's really nothing, the only thing that's on ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com that costs anything is the merch. And if you want me for a consultation regarding spirituality or shamanism or history or politics or philosophy or whatever, but everything else is free.
Okay.
And that's the way we want to keep it, because we don't believe that people should be charged money for hearing the truth.
Great. Thank you again for coming on. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.